The challenge is when you can't tell who's a human and who's a robot and everyone's talking together, that's the end of democracy. It's not just that the human is in the loop, you're the loop, and AI comes in to assist you.
Meet Allison Shapira, the CEO of Global Public Speaking, an executive advisor, Harvard lecturer, best-selling author, and trained opera singer. For over 20 years, Allison has helped top leaders, from prime ministers to Fortune 100 executives, communicate with clarity and confidence. In her latest book, AI for the Authentic Leader, she explores how leaders can harness AI without losing their humanity.
What really worries me now is that AI voices are starting to incorporate vocal fry. Now, as people are starting to use HeyGen and other avatar creation tools to put videos of themselves.
It can look like me, it can sound like me, but it should say, hey, by the way, I'm not Jeff. Would it be wrong for someone to take on a persona on purpose, publicly, with not just a voice, but also an avatar, and to basically be programming that avatar to communicate?
It's such a great question. And that's
All right, everybody, welcome back to the AI for Business Owners podcast. I am, as always, your host, Jeff Torello, and today I have an amazing guest. I can't wait to have this conversation. Allison Shapira is here talking to us. Allison, you want to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. It's great to be with you, Jeff. My name is Allison Shapira, and I have a background as an opera singer and have spent the past 20 years, 20 plus, helping leaders build their confidence to be more effective and more authentic.
Awesome. I have so many questions. I can't wait.
I bet you do.
Let me start with the weird one. Does a background in opera singing help you with public speaking?
100%.
Yeah?
In fact, I didn't think so when I left opera and went into communication, but I soon realized that everything I learned as an opera singer actually made me a really great public speaker and an even better coach of other speakers. Because if you think about it, an opera singer can breathe and project their voice. They have stage presence, they can command a room, and they can perform in front of their harshest critics, which for leaders speaking to the board of directors or a small business owner speaking to an important, huge client,
Right.
that comes in really handy. So actually, the opera training was an incredible entry point into the field of communication.
That's cool. I would have placed the emphasis elsewhere from my intuition. I don't mean to suggest that anything you said was wrong. That's not the vibe I wanted there. But more, I would have thought the stage presence, the handling the audience, et cetera, was the sort of the more important piece in order to be able to stand in front of an audience, but not the projection and all the other pieces that you mentioned there that just wouldn't have, I'm not an opera singer, so obviously I wouldn't have known the training, right? But it makes perfect sense when you explain it. Have you actually, with any of your clients, have you had any of them try to sing in order to learn some of the techniques?
We don't make people sing. People's fear of singing is even bigger than their fear of public speaking, if such a thing is possible. So I don't make people sing. But what I do is I spend time helping them find the best placement of their voice, because some people artificially speak too high or too low than their natural speaking voice. And a number of people, Jeff, I'm sure you hear this on other podcasts, they use vocal fry, where their voice trails off. You have this wonderful, rich voice. You don't use that, but other people do. And what really worries me now is that AI voices are starting to incorporate vocal fry. And I'm on a campaign to get the AI companies to get rid of the vocal fry. Let's amplify the best of the human voice instead of its weakness, just to make it sound more relatable.
Or does it a dead giveaway it was an AI?
No, there are plenty of humans
To the other.
who already bother me using vocal fry. What bothers me is that the AI companies are choosing the gravelly sound of AI in order to make the voice more relatable. But what they're doing, if you think about it, is they're programming weakness into the voices of the future, because your children, their children are growing up listening to AI assistants, and they'll model those voices.
Of course. Yeah.
And so we're going to model the weakness, and vocal fry is something that can produce nodes. It can make you hoarse. I mean, it can ruin your voice if it's excessive. And that's why I help people harness their breathing for a strong, powerful voice. And I want to make sure with AI that we're still protecting the power of the human voice.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I would tend to agree with what you're talking about. Just a really quick aside. A long time ago, I worked at Intel, and I used to work in a couple different roles. I found myself at the Consumer Electronics Show in the early 2000s, and Intel had hired some stage presence to do a demo every 30 minutes, and the talent was trying to conserve their voice because it was many days every 30 minutes. It was, you know, a lot of work, and they were, if you've never been to the CES show, it's super loud. And so even if you're mic'd, you kind of have to really, really use your voice a lot because no one can hear you, right? And this one particular gentleman who was from Louisiana was one of the primary presenters. His thing was he would buy local hot peppers and put them in water, and that was his drink in order to preserve his voice. And I kept thinking, I don't think there's any science there. I don't know what you're doing. Maybe there's some voodoo.
I don't know about science. I
Yeah.
know hot tea with honey is great.
Yeah.
Afterwards, whiskey or bourbon can be
Mm,
really can be
a
a nice muscle
restorative.
relaxant. So I've done that before. After, not before.
Sure, sure.
Big distinction.
It'd make
But
the
there are a
conversation
number of
interesting, but I understand.
scientific and non-scientific remedies that you can use.
That was just very funny because I was kind of like, I think you like pepper water. It seems like it's more likely. Okay. Part of the idea, obviously, is to talk about AI stuff, and I'm sure you have a couple questions for me to put me through the paces and try and help you out with a few things. What is your opinion on the idea of a digital avatar to represent a personality or to be used as like a product? So if you have an individual, let's say a well-known psychologist or a therapist of some sort, and part of what they do is they make an avatar that is visually looks like them, and also like what works as a chatbot on their website and ends up having a derived voice from them. What's your opinion about that structurally?
I appreciate it structurally, and I talk about it actually in my new book, AI for the Authentic Leader, because I want to talk about what are the boundaries of proper authenticity or proper AI use that still fall within the bounds of authenticity. So, is what you've just mentioned authentic? And the question is, how do you define authenticity? If it's true to the original, then it's not authentic. But if you define authenticity as in alignment with your values and beliefs, then it could be authentic if it comes from you and your writing. So it's authentic to who you are, but it isn't authentic to what you are, you could say. And I've experimented with, and am in the process of experimenting with what I would call Pocket Allison, where my clients have access to both a chatbot and an avatar of me based on all of my books and my teaching and videos and articles. And then we can customize the avatar and each specific chatbot to each client based on the transcripts of our sessions.
Ah, now that's really powerful. I like that.
And I've already done that, not the avatar part, but the chatbot part
Sure.
with one of my business coaches, where he encourages me to record all of our coaching sessions. So I recorded them and I took the transcripts over 7 months and I created a custom chatbot. I removed any confidential client information. I created a custom chatbot and I also said, based on all available public information about this person, this personality, I'd like you to act as my personal coach. And I continue to chat with that person even as recently as today. I chatted with the avatar, not the avatar, but with the chatbot. And it was like, don't forget, so and so likes to say this. And we've talked about this before.
Right.
And I really like that. I like the avatar component as long as the avatar is doesn't have the latency and it's lifelike enough and it's very clear it's not me. It's my likeness, it's approved by me, it's managed by me, but it's not me.
Okay. I think that makes sense. And I think that I would agree with the demarcation line you're drawing. I don't see why I would disagree with that. For the audience, just to infer the right information, part of what you're getting to is that the system that you built for you, or that you would recommend for a client, is a fine-tuned model of your speaking, thought, spoken words or written words or whatever, your content, so that when the model is trying to answer a query, a prompt, it's using your information as its training data set and not just the general wide internet. There's a lot of commentary, and I'm curious what your thoughts are. There's a lot of commentary that your content necessarily capture your, when I say voice in this context, I don't mean the spoken word, but more your personality, right? Your content can't, like, I'm trying to frame this correctly so that everybody understands the question. I think you'll already infer the question, but I want to make sure the audience hears it too. You make a chatbot of Jeff, virtual Jeff, and the books I've written, the content I've posted, etc. But is that me, or is that just my thoughts on that topic? And if you're asking something off that beaten path, as it were, is the AI really going to infer and answer with what I would answer? Or if I haven't answered that question before, what's the AI going to do? Obviously, it's going to make it up. That's what the AI's job is. We all agree that's what an LLM does. But does that then, again, back to your authenticity conversation, is that authentic, or should the chatbot answer, I have no data on that, right? Like, what's your opinion there? I don't think there's a right or wrong, but there's certainly opinion.
It's a great question. And these are the kinds of questions that we're asking and attempting to answer right now with no previous information. I mean, when we look at the field of communication and public speaking, that's existed for thousands of years. We still teach what Aristotle taught us 2,000 years ago. But when we look at questions like what you've asked of authenticity and what's the boundaries of this knowledge, nobody has those answers. We're determining that, and as a society, we're creating those boundaries now. So I like the idea of having something that's authentic to you, in that it's an extension of you, just like a book you write is an extension of you. But once the question veers into new territory, what does the chatbot do? I think that's a great question. I don't have an answer for that. I'd like to give it some thought, and I'm wondering what your answer is for that.
Yeah, so I have thought about this a bunch, and I have an opinion that I will certainly share. I would think that the most honest approach would be for the chatbot or the LLM or whatever to be programmed to respond with, here's how I think Jeff would answer that question, but I don't have direct data to suggest that. I'm using the information I have available to me, and I'm making the best guess. I think Jeff would answer like this. To me, that's authentic, because the LLM is saying, hey, I'm guessing, but I'm using the information I have, but I don't have a single quote, an instance, a podcast transcript, nothing where, this person has actually addressed that specific question, and I can't read their mind. I think of it like this. I think we're probably all on the same basic page here, but think of an assistant, a human being who's worked for you for 10 years. Just make that up, okay? Yes, they know your coffee order. Cool. Yes, they know the way you like to fly on a plane, or where you want to sit and all that stuff. Sure, they have your preferences. After 10 years, can they infer how you'll probably respond or react to a query? Sure. Are they always going to be right? Well, no, but you wouldn't expect them to. Like, it would be weird for you to presume that they could answer everything for you. Otherwise, why do you need to be there at all, right? And maybe they get it 70% of the time. They get it right. This is how I think your answer. That, yeah, you're right. That's what I think. But sometimes you have information they don't have, and your answer's not the same, right?
Right, right. And there's a lot of nuance to many of these answers as well. The answer can often be, it depends. Here are a few different ways we can look at it. And you alluded to something that's important as well. In what voice, in what tense does not tense, but in terms of first or second person or third person, what person does the chatbot use when referring to you? So you use the third person to say, Allison hasn't spoken about this.
Right.
Does the chatbot, is it programmed to speak as me, saying it as me, or responding, here's what Allison would say, in the third person?
Yeah. And I actually think, obviously the system can be programmed to do any of those. I would way back to an opinion question again. I don't know that I could call this right or wrong, My opinion is the chatbot, the fine-tuned LLM, whatever, the automation is not me. It is using information about me. It's probably going to be pretty accurate. I wrote a book on leadership. There's a lot of opinion in there about my thoughts on leadership and how to lead teams, especially remote teams. If you asked a question inside that purview, inside that layer of onion, it probably would have a pretty decent answer, assuming my opinion hasn't changed since I wrote the book, but that's another conversation. No, wrong revision. Okay. Anyway, but when you go off the reservation a little bit, I would want it always to say, here's how I think Jeff would answer that question. Even if I had direct reference for me, I wouldn't want it to propose that it's me. I don't think that's realistic or authentic. I don't think that's the way I'd position it. There are others who might want to position it that way, and I don't know that I could say that it's wrong, but it wouldn't work for me.
So that would be a challenge then if it was your avatar answering, because it would be your likeness responding in your voice, but it's still not you.
Yeah. And for me, I would want that as my disclaimer. Basically, I guess what I'm saying, I'm answering again for myself. Yeah, it can look like me, it can sound like me, great, but it should say, hey, by the way, I'm not Jeff. I'm a tool. I'm here to help you. I want to be positive, but I also want to be honest. And he's not here speaking.
That's right. And that's a critical distinction now as people are starting to use HeyGen and other avatar creation tools to put videos of themselves online. Or there was a CEO on LinkedIn who was using HeyGen to create a video series using his likeness or using his avatar. And it has to be clear when it's an avatar as opposed to when it's a human. And not as in it has to be obvious because it will very soon not be obvious, but it has to be clearly delineated, unambiguously marked. This is not a human, both for liability reasons and for reasons of trust and transparency. So that, I think, is a critical component that has to be included. Then we ask ourselves, just because I can, should I? Is it a good idea? And that's a question everyone has to answer for themselves on both the creator side and on the consumer side.
I have a very interesting, this is going to be a philosophical question, so it's just an opinion for you. I don't think there's a right or wrong, but there's a book that I've read a long, long time ago. The name of the book is called Ender's Game. But in the book, in the story, there are two genius level children who are take on a nom de plume, if you will, on the internet, for lack of a better phrase. And they take on different personalities. They happen to be a brother and sister, but it's a long story. They take on different personalities and they get into the realm of politics and they become the personalities. One's Demosthenes and one is Locke, and they are arguing different sides of issues, etc. And they end up with followings, and they end up eventually getting nominated to live political office positions. But they're children. They have a very high IQ, but they're obviously barely of age. But they develop these personalities, and what's in my head is it wrong? There's a legality component, there's a morality component here, so we'll see where we go. Sorry, this is taking a really interesting turn, but we're having fun. Would it be wrong for someone to take on a persona on purpose, publicly, so we'll say on the internet, with not just a voice, but also an avatar, and to basically be programming that avatar to communicate and using that as the way they associate with the world, whether they become super famous or not? And I don't mean like they've just programmed an AI and off it goes. I mean that they have almost like a puppet where they're kind of at the keyboard. Maybe they're programming the AI while they type and whatever. I'm just curious what your thoughts are about someone doing that because they want a certain image or they want a certain voice, but they don't want to be who they are.
It's such a great question. And that's one of the best books that
Okay.
I've read
right.
years
So
and years
know
ago.
the book.
I mean, it's,
Sorry.
it's a classic. It's a classic book.
Yeah.
And so far ahead of its time, it's incredible. The question is, should you be able to be anyone you want to be, not who you actually are? And there's so much behind that. Maybe who you are is not who you feel like. Maybe who you are is judged by others. So because you're a child. I don't remember how old Ender was. Was he 8? Was he 13? I can't remember in the book.
Throughout the book, he actually ages pretty quickly, but he ends up somewhere in the early teens when he ends the book.
So if your true identity, people will discriminate against because of their assumptions of what a child should sound like and act like. That's one area. At the same time, there is a certain level of, I would say, experience that comes with age. So if you're playing a role, I mean, there's a whole host
Yeah,
of
it's not a
moral
simple.
issues that go into this.
Right.
I have no problem conceptually with you, if given the tools and the opportunity to appear however you choose to appear. Where I take issue is with you claiming to be something that you are not and lying about it, misrepresenting it. Now, it's okay to say, here's the image that I'm presenting, and it may or may not be who I am, but why don't you judge me based on my actions and my words, not based on my appearance? That's transparent without also revealing who you are, as opposed to saying, this is who I am, asserting it, and then it being revealed that you're not who you say you are. So that's conceptually how I would address that question.
All right. I got one little follow-up to it, and then I'm going to let you take over and ask the
Sure,
things you want to
bring
ask.
it.
Everything you just said, I like. If I then added the twist of the AI is actually producing the output and not the person, does it change? And I'm throwing you a curveball on purpose, but if the LLM is answering and producing the words, does it change? Your opinion?
Do you get to edit the LLM's answer behind the scenes?
I would say you can revise the output from the LLM if you want to, but in this scenario, I'll say that, 7 out of 10 times you don't. You just let it go.
Well, this scenario is not a hypothetical. Right now, many people write something for LinkedIn, they throw it into ChatGPT, and they say, make this sound good for LinkedIn.
Right.
And then they post it on LinkedIn. Maybe they tweak it, maybe they don't. They post it on LinkedIn. And that's why I now see a very specific structure to most of my colleagues' LinkedIn posts because of how they're being shaped by AI. Now,
Right.
I can see that behind the scenes. Probably soon I won't be able to because of how the LLMs will develop, but it's happening now. The challenge is, and there's a powerful quote by Yuval Noah Harari, who I quote in my book. He's a historian and critic of AI as well, and he says the challenge is when you can't tell who's a human and who's a robot, and everyone's talking together, that's the end of democracy. That's the concern that I have. If you have someone in a room, in a metaphysical room, in a virtual room, communicating, a group of humans, and some of them are not human, some are AIs. Now the dynamics have shifted and the asymmetry has shifted as well. Because as I talk about in my book, AIs have a power of persuasion that humans don't, because AIs have an incredible amount of data on you based on your publicly available voting history and demographics and buying history that now makes them superhuman persuasive. I don't think the grammar of that phrase was right, but the sentiment is right.
Yeah. Conceptually, no problem.
Conceptually, that now you have these individuals in the room who are exponentially more persuasive than other people in the room, and we don't know who's a human and who's a robot or who's an AI. And that, for me, and for Yuval Noah Harari, who I really respect, is an enormous societal problem, and that's a trust problem.
And we already have it. That problem actually
We're in it.
exists. We're in it right now. I would add one more component to that, and that is that in addition to everything you said, the AI is able to train on an amount of content that most humans can't. You think about it from this perspective, who's good at debate? Probably the most well-rounded, well-read person who has the most content available to pull from. So they win the most debates, and they know how to manipulate the conversation to the right way, all that kind of stuff. The LLM wins every debate. The LLM has more backstory, more information, more ways to say something to you to make it be impactful that you probably don't have because it's read, every word on the internet, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's hard to debate an LLM and win, right?
And yes, and the LLM has also studied the art of empathy. So it's not just about having the right arguments, which don't necessarily work. It's being able to empathize with the other person and understand where they're coming from, and then understanding who they voted for, where they
Right.
live, and other factors that influence who they are. So you have data, you have facts, and you have the ability to instantaneously tune up your empathy in order to win an argument or change someone's beliefs about something. And the AI can do it at scale for millions of people. And that's the downside of AI that I talk about in my book.
Yeah.
It's not just let's use it to be better humans. Let's also understand the incredible manipulative power that it has that can be wielded by individuals who utilize it.
At a high level, there's pros and cons to all things, especially technologies, and we all agree with that. I think it would be safe to say. There's certainly positives for AI. There's a lot of capability that the AI can be an assistant, can do all sorts of neat things. Cool. But there's definitely a conversation that's been brewing for probably 20 years or so, but not everyone has been in the conversation about data privacy and information that you share. And, like there's a HIPAA law in the United States. Why did that come about? What happened to cause that to be there? Why suddenly is health information considered private? Why wasn't it always private? Or it was always private, but what changed? Well, the digitization and the sharing and the ability to sell that data very quickly begot, oh boy, we really need a way to combat that. We need a law. Data sharing from an advertising perspective has been an on and off issue in visibility in the populace for 10 plus years. Facebook, Cambridge Analytica, etc. But there's still a huge data privacy conversation to be had with AI. Is it helpful for your assistant to know that you prefer aisle seats when you ask it to book a flight? Yes. Is it good that it remembers that? Okay, I can see that. But is it good that it remembers everything about you and uses it when you don't even know?
So that's the challenge. And that's what holds me back from using certain agents that I want to have access to my data. So I think it's helpful for your assistant to get to know you and to know your preferences and to know what bugs you, what pisses you off, so that it can help manage your mood, which is an important role of an assistant. The challenge is we're starting to use our AI, our chatbots, as our therapists. So we're not just talking about how angry we get when we have to sit on the window instead of in the aisle. We're talking about trauma. We're talking about experiences that have shaped us that are not for public consumption, that now live inside of a server, wherever they're kept, and then can be sold or can be accessed by a third party app so that it can better serve you. But what's it going to better serve you? Is it going to better serve you trauma therapy? I mean, there's so much there that we have to understand in terms of what data and how do I decide and what do I control?
Oh, I agree. I agree 100%. I'm a huge privacy and security nerd and have been for a long time. I'll say a few things. First one is it's deceptive for most folks, and I get it. There's a technical engineering piece in here that, not the general populace is not going to get. But an LLM doesn't remember anything that you tell it. But you don't talk to an LLM. You talk to an application that talks to the LLM. And it's that
Right. That's right.
application that remembers
right.
everything. And that's the application that sells the data and will eventually start showing you ads. I know you don't see ads today when you talk to an AI, but it is coming strong, right? A new protocol was just announced this past summer that allows agentic AI to make purchases on your behalf. And there's a bunch of security around it and a whole bunch of cool stuff. And I just saw an article earlier this week or last week, not 100% sure, that Walmart has now positioned to push into ChatGPT and allow purchases of Walmart
Right.
content. And the reason that's relevant is because Amazon explicitly blocked that behavior. In other words, OpenAI went to Amazon and said, do you want to be in the system? And Amazon said no. And they block all kind of agent AI and agentic access to Amazon, thinking that they're going to keep their walled garden. I am not sure that that's a smart move for Amazon, but okay. I mean, they're going to make their choices. The other side of this equation is Walmart has said, heck yeah, we want to be available inside OpenAI. And so what you're looking at in the future here is there's going to be a bunch of purchase security stuff, handling the credit card kind of thing. I'm not super worried about that. It's the privacy part, and I'm sure you're in the same spot. You tell OpenAI to search for product X. It searches for the product, gives you 3 vendors, perhaps, maybe. Okay, maybe you program who those vendors are. Maybe it does based on revenue, whatever. But you decide to purchase one. Okay, great. But that purchase history, what you bought, when you bought it, that becomes part of your profile, not in the LLM, which doesn't know what that even means, but inside the app, inside ChatGPT, inside one, all those, right? And that's the place that I think is the questionable. What do you do? Why do you need that?
It's interesting that you say that because that kind of data already exists now when I use my loyalty card at
Of
CVS
course.
or at Giant or at Target. And I remember a number of years ago there was this uproar at Target because people would go in, like a young woman would go in and get a pregnancy test, buy a kit from Target and then start getting mail to her home
Right.
for new mothers,
Right.
and she's a minor. I mean, so
Right.
we've dealt with these issues before. There were challenges then, there's still challenges now, and to your point, they're much bigger challenges because of us living more of our lives through these applications, with applications holding on to so much more data, and now we have the ability to process all that data and use it in ways we never have before.
Agreed. If you think through this, you know, your credit card company probably has more data about you than you would ever infer and is able to make assumptions that you may not necessarily agree with. And for a long time, they didn't sell it. They sell it now. And they sell it now because they're competing with everything else that gathers all your, everything you do and say on social media is monetized.
Right.
And I think people know that now, but maybe they don't. I do think a lot of people think they don't care or that it's not relevant or that it's not important. And maybe for some it's not, but your conversation specifically about, pregnancy tests and then flyers for expectant mothers and like the whole family going, whoa, what's going on here? I don't know. I'm innocent, right? So that's just when that happens, it can happen now 5, 10-fold because it won't just be what you bought. It'll be the conversations you're having that you think are private, that are not, the way you're using the AI as a therapist, like you talked about, the tools that you add to your agentic session tell a lot about what you're trying to do, the questions you ask. You're writing a book. Maybe the book has interesting scenes in it of one type of nature or another. That data gets sold. Is it sold as it was a book being written, or is it sold as this is what the person's typing, thinking, saying, doing? I don't have that context. But I'll say something a little harsh, but if you wouldn't post it on social media, you shouldn't put it in an AI because you shouldn't assume the privacy that is not actually there.
That statement, if true, and I know it's not true or if untrue, I mean, it's a position, would change the behavior of the way millions of people are currently using
Yeah.
AI.
Yeah.
And we saw when Sam Altman mentioned that they had to hold on to, I'm not going to say it correctly, you'll know how to say it correctly, but holding on to the chat history of people for legal purposes demonstrates that whatever you've spoken to AI in confidence about is not in confidence. And we're hearing this discussion about what's the term? It's AI. I know when you speak to your spouse, it's privilege, AI
Oh,
privilege. so that what protections are there for AI privilege, the things you say to an AI in private?
Yeah, and I think the problem from me, and again, I'm on the extreme of privacy, security, et cetera. I would not be considered mainstream. I'd be considered way off to the side. I don't have social media accounts. I don't do that. And I haven't done it for more than a decade. But again, my view of trying to impart to people how there's no privacy in this system. Anything you say to an AI, you should assume you posted on your Facebook feed or Instagram or whatever. And if you don't think that that was something you wanted public, you shouldn't have said it or shouldn't say it to an AI. I know you had a little bit of a conversation or question around how can you take advantage of some of this stuff privately, right?
I did, because you mentioned, I think in a previous episode you were talking about AI agents, and for me as a business owner, as a small business owner, while I focus on AI and authenticity in the way we communicate, from an organizational perspective, I am waiting to be able to have an AI agent do all of the things that waste my time, that waste my assistant's time. Something as simple as creating a new Zoho contact and a new opportunity and attaching the signed contract to the opportunity. All of this, first of all, should be voice activated if we had the voice capabilities for that. And second of all, should be done, like, these are things that I believe are not a good use of a human's time. They're a good use of an AI's time, but how do I find and build an agent that I can trust to give my Zoho password, my Google Calendar, access to my Gmail, which has client information? It has to talk to all of those different systems in order to complete an action without accidentally emailing my clients for me, or something like that. So I ask you, can I do that technically, and then can I trust it as well?
Yeah, so it's a phenomenal question, and the answer is actually multi-staged and complex, but I'll give you the high-level answer. We talked a little bit about it, so I'll just reiterate. Remember, it's the LLM itself can't remember in and of itself. Agentic chat isn't an LLM. Agentic chat is a program, an application, and it uses the LLM and makes calls. The agentic chat is able to remember stuff, and so your demark of where am I safe? Like, again, you can send something to the LLM. I will say this. Anything you send to the LLM can't be remembered by the LLM, but can be stored by the company running the LLM and used for training purposes. In fact, if you look at any of the end user license agreements or privacy policies for OpenAI, Google, doesn't matter, they tell you, do not send us private data. We train on the data that every conversation you have, they train with. Now,
Isn't that, even if you check the box that says, "Don't improve the model with my data"?
so here's the thing. There is a checkbox. And the question then becomes, do you want to trust the checkbox is valid, or do you want to wait for a lawsuit before you find out?
Fair
In other
question.
words, I don't mean to suggest that OpenAI is evil or anybody, right? But, how many times in the world of technology has a company said we do X and they end up doing Y, whether it's inadvertent or intentional, not even part of the conversation,
Right.
right?
Correct. Mhm.
So what I would say is the opportunity exists for folks that are concerned about this to run some amount of LLMs locally. And depends a lot on your hardware. And that's a problem for some people because sometimes you only have a phone. And even if you have, a decent modern computer, you may not have enough hardware to run an LLM. If you have one of the newer Macs, you probably could run a couple LLMs locally. And so you'd be able to contain all of the information locally. And there are some programs that are available to use. One of them is called Jan.ai, Jan.ai, which gives you an interface like ChatGPT, but it's on your computer and it's not going out to the cloud to talk to models. It can go out and talk to ChatGPT or whatever if you want it to, but it also can run the model locally. But running the model locally is so slow compared to what's going on in the cloud that most people will be like, ugh, I can't talk to it. I get it. There's a trade-off that you can make, which is you can run Jan or another tool like that locally, have it point at OpenAI for the actual LLM part, but keep the documents, the data, and the conversations local. But you added a variable in here that complicates the story, and I want to talk about it, which is a good thing to do because I'm sure you're not the only one that's asking it like this. If you've got your data in Google Drive or OneDrive or somewhere else, if your data is in the cloud, I will submit to you that your data is already accessible outside of your control. As a small business owner, is that a huge problem? That's a conversation or a decision for you to make. But, if you're using Gmail, Google reads everything you have. Not just to train on it, but in fact, if you don't notice, to show you ads, right? Inside that email and collectively as a whole. Google knows everything you buy at Amazon if you purchase Amazon stuff with a Gmail account. And the concerts you go to, like whatever you do with Gmail, put it this way, Gmail's been free since the first day. Why? Because it's a data collection tool, not a mail tool. It was never a mail tool. It was how do we get this information? How do we know what tickets they bought? How do we know to suggest the next concert to go to? Well, if we have all their emails and we see what they did at Ticketmaster, we can interject before Ticketmaster can and show them when the next concert's showing up for that artist, as an example, right? If you're already at that point, if you've already pretty much put your data in the hands of someone else, is the AI any different? And there's a lot of nuance to that question because it's not the same across the board. Maybe you trust Google. Maybe you don't trust OpenAI. Okay. You can actually sign agreements with each of these companies around data sharing and specifically get them into a legally binding sort of, I don't want to call it a contract as much as an agreement that you both sign, where they say, we won't train on your data. And you say, I don't know what you end up having to say because I haven't signed one because I wouldn't do it. I don't actually do those sorts of things with let's be completely full disclosure. I have an entire server in my basement that runs my AI and I don't use commercial AI, but that's not what everybody else is going to be able to do. So I'm not trying to say that that's the answer. But you can sign agreements, especially if you have an entity, because they don't want to do it with the individual, but where you get some sort of data protection and data liability capability from them. But again, I'll say to you, it's only as good as it is until it breaks or gets violated. And then your question becomes, am I recovering from that? Do I have to have a lawsuit? I can't tell you how much risk there is there. Is there a way to do agentic locally? Yes. Is it easy for end users? No, it's not.
For non-technical,
yeah, I know.
Opera singing end users.
Opera singing. I guess there is an opportunity.
An opportunity.
An opportunity. Do you use the Opera web browser, by the way? Because if you don't, you're missing out. It is available and it is a web browser, and it has a lot of privacy controls.
Good point.
There is the potential, I have to think about it. There is the potential to possibly write an application that allows what you're talking about, uses OpenAI or someone to do the offload of the AI part, but does all the agentic locally, runs locally. You can see what it's doing. You can see the logs. It's executing on your machine, not any cloud service. But I'll say this, most people won't go down that path because, like, if I was going to write that and try to sell to you, are you going to pay monthly for something that's on your computer all the time? Because it's not a service. It's not in the cloud. Am I going to get the revenue from you? Or are you going to subscribe? Or are you going to just want to buy it once? You're going to want to buy it for $100 and I won't make back all the cost in building it, right?
And if you built it, do you have a back-end way of getting that data that I don't know about?
What we can do is make the code open source so that it can be evaluated and you can see there's no back doors. But like, you've really got to be savvy enough to go down that path, right? Is it possible to do that? Absolutely. If I did that as a consultant and I wrote that if I write that for you, I could ship you the code, you own it, you can have that evaluated, you can be confident with it, you can run it. Sure, that solves Allison's problem.
Yeah.
But
I'd rather wait for a company to do that for me as targeting small businesses where it's easy to implement and I don't have to think about it. But I don't feel like with my level of knowledge in that area, I don't feel like it's quite there yet.
No, I hear you. Again, from the privacy security angle, there's concerns. What I'm doing with some of the existing commercial tools when I when I'm doing things private or for my company or financially or whatever, it's on my private local AI. Right? I'm good with that. But for other stuff, if I want to think about a marketing approach or I want to help gen up a outline for a white paper that I want to go pen, etc., I do use the commercial AIs. I tend to use ones that don't require or need a sign-in, so that there's no account, there's no tracking, there's no whatever. So one of them that I do look at really often is called Duck.ai, and it's an offshoot of the DuckDuckGo search engine. If you've never used that, or if somebody listening doesn't, it can save information for you. But if you do it in like a private browser and you close the browser, it doesn't save anything. There's no cookies. It's done. And so you can go have a quick conversation and then purge it, as it were. I like that one. There's another interesting one I just found that's agentic, that has some capabilities and cool tools, but I don't know anything about the company itself, and I wouldn't give it private stuff anyway, but it's called Incredible.one, O-N-E. It's spelled out, not the number one. And there are many others. I'm just giving you a couple examples. Yeah, it's a very good question and something dear to my heart, but not an easily answered one today.
Right. And frustrating because so much of our time is spent in these mindless tasks that we shouldn't have to do. So I hear about AI developments and I see this future in which things are different. I can see it so clearly. And yet the gap between where we can go and where we are now is so vast. Even with all these developments, the gap is still there. And so I'm waiting for certain parts of my life to get much easier so that I can focus on the more strategic and
Yeah.
fun and big picture parts of my life.
I was promised the AI would make it easier. Where is that promise?
This one part is very interesting. Everyone's talking about how AI will make their lives easier and they'll have less that they have to do. But I remember the first time I hired a full-time assistant or a full-time staff person, I thought they were gonna make my life easier, but I realized they were so good that all the things that would have taken me longer, they just did, so we moved forward twice as fast. So we were actually twice as busy, and then I hired another person. I made the same mistake. I'm not hiring the person, but assuming
Right.
it would make our lives easier. Now we're moving 3 times as fast. So AI is not actually, I think, going to give us more free time. I think it's going to be pushing us to move faster and faster than ever before.
Yeah, super interesting. The way I frame that in my head, I don't think I disagree, but I would just reword it, is that first level, I need an assistant. You're running into roadblocks that slow you down from doing the things you think you want to do next. You bring the assistant on, those roadblocks are removed so that you can uncover and learn about the second tier roadblocks you didn't get to previously. And then you start running into those and we're like, geez, I didn't even know they was here. What the heck's going on? And part of the conversation that people don't seem to go back and think about is, well, wait a second. Are those roadblocks on purpose? Should I be going this slow? Is breaking the roadblocks the only possible answer, or are they here because they should be here? And I'll make an analogy. You can grow up too fast. You can have experiences that you probably shouldn't have gone through at a certain age. Now, I'm not talking about all of us. I'm just saying that it exists. And so you end up having to mature in this area, and boy, you're woefully immature in another area because you didn't have the slow, methodical exposure that we all did, even as fast teenagers. You know what I mean? And it proves the point that sometimes the things that slow you down are there on purpose. You need to learn a lesson. You need to, right. Is that the roadblocks with assistance? I don't know. I don't have that answer.
Very good point, though.
All right. Well, look, we've covered a lot of ground. We had some
Yes, we have.
pretty entertaining conversations. It was fun. I really enjoyed it. Do you want the last comment, the last question, the last word?
I would say we're writing the future as we speak. And we have a power now I think we've never had before at this scale to weigh in to create the kind of future that we would like to see. I wrote my book, AI for the Authentic Leader, so that people would realize they have a choice. You can use AI to just outsource your brain, or you can use it to make your brain better than ever and make you better than ever. And so I would ask people as they start to adopt AI and bring it into their workflows and their companies to remember it's not just that the human is in the loop, you're the loop. The human is the loop, and AI comes in to assist you, but you maintain the agency. And that's what's important for us, I believe, as we start to integrate these tools more into our lives.
Yeah, that's well said. I'll just add a small comment. I actually HIDL, human in the loop, happens all the time with what I do, right, from a consulting perspective. I don't ever think of it that way. I always think of it as AI in the loop. I'm bringing AI into what I already do or what the process
Exactly.
already is, for it can help where it's good at, but it isn't good at everything, and I don't want to trust it with the whole solution. We're saying the same thing. I just frame it differently. All
Well
right.
said.
Well, that's a great way to close it. Thank you. It was awesome talking to you. I had a great time. I learned a whole bunch.
I had a great time as well. And if people want to find out more, they can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. And I hope you will pick up a copy of the book, AI for the Authentic Leader, available now.
Awesome. Thank you, Allison. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
My pleasure, Jeff.